Welcome, Kabir, and thank you for joining us today.
Namaste. Thank you very much, Matt. In one way, I really don't know what I'm doing here. I guess it's karma, proves past lives. I can't think of anything much that I've done in this life to warrant this. Partly I say this because I haven't really been involved much with FDCW for a while. So yeah, this was a bit of a surprise, just some juxtaposition of auspicious circumstances. Maybe it's because I'm following my guru's advice, who told me to do a retreat. Rinpoche last year told me to do a retreat. So I'm just about to start that tomorrow. So maybe when one starts to think about doing what the guru suggested, things begin to happen. Maybe it's something like that, something auspicious like that. I don't know. Anyway, I want to say, I'm very humbled by the fact that Wendy Ridley, Alison Murdoch, and other luminaries seem to be here, people whom I regard so highly and who've done so much. So I really thank all of you, especially, I'm just mentioning those two people and also Victoria, because I know those people. I don't know the rest of you, I'm afraid. Okay, so I'm supposed to talk intelligibly for 20-25 minutes. So I already told Matt to interrupt and to say things, ask things. I don't know if, weaving, when we speak of weaving our experience of the world, we have very beautiful weaving in India, and I'm sure in so many countries of the world. And sometimes it seems that the way that we weave our lives is just such a mess. It's, the weaving has really gone amiss. We're working with machinery that is, really needs updating. And because we are so caught up in habitual patterns, we get stuck again and again, on our loom, we get stuck, and the patterns we start creating are unbelievably complicated, confusing, and suffering. Let me just start by mentioning an experience, a very painful time that I had, which really made me think about karma, interdependence. So COVID had just been announced, and in India, like elsewhere, we were very soon in lockdown. Many things were happening in India, very powerfully suffering things were happening to poor people, for example. I found myself becoming more and more wrapped up in what I can only describe, and I think I'm plagiarizing here, remembering something that Natpa Chogyam wrote in a very amazing book called Rainbow of Liberated Energy. I think the title has changed now. He spoke about a miasma of constricted energy. Whereas we have this wonderful rainbow-like mind, potential, where all our emotions can be liberated, where we can be of incredible benefit to ourselves and others. And here there was this kind of constriction happening. There were some external reasons I could see. I was very worried about certain aspects of work, but the intensity of it, and the fact that I experienced a degree of depression and self-questioning and even self-loathing for long periods of time. And this lasted months and months, and it caused me to even reach out to a therapist, which I've never done in my life, because I was a little bit at the end of my tether, and even for a little while took medication, okay? So this seemed to just envelop me. And so whatever I experienced at that time, it just felt somehow not real in one sense, but incredibly suffering. And I remember being at Root Institute for a while. I wasn't keeping a journal. That would have been interesting to do. But the experience came like a dark cloud. It was like something came up. And of course, it can be explained in many different ways. A good friend from Australia's partner was explaining it in terms of Jungian therapy, Jungian way of looking at the unconscious and so forth, and that's all very valid. But I see it in Buddhist terms as just an incredibly powerful karma rising. There were some dependent factors, of course, causes and conditions that were triggering it. But it came and then it lasted and then it's gone. I can't give a day or a week or a month where it just seemed to go, but it phased out, that experience. And I was, for some moments in Bodh Gaya, I never felt, I wouldn't say suicidal, but I would be getting up in bed and hugging my knees and just in a state of, at the end of my tether. It's hard to put into words. And it was very interesting because it also seemed to bring up, I attracted at that time a lot of negativity from, let's just say the world, okay? From different quarters. And it was extraordinary. It was extraordinarily painful. So it really does seem that karma is definite. It gave me that. Of course, some people wouldn't see it that way, would they? But with my background in Buddhist teachings, karma seemed to be definite. Unwholesome actions lead to suffering. There are dependently related events happening, which make me, experience various things, and they're changing moment by moment, for sure. But it's very interesting to also look at things that at that period, 2021, caused me tremendous anxiety. Those same things, similar things are happening now, absolutely no problem. Absolutely no problem with them. So, what's going on? I'll put on some more light. And these amazing new lights, so you just kind of touch them and they come on. Okay, so interdependence and karma. I'm thinking now, because I'm involved with the schools in Maitreya projects, the Root Institute School in Bodh Gaya, and the upcoming Kushinagar School, the Maitreya project in Kushinagar, just to let you know, it's happening. It requires a lot of dependent events for it to happen, but it is happening. We have a very courageous, stubborn director who's not giving up. So it's definitely going to happen. And we have tremendous enlightened input actually at the moment. So it will come about. So a school will come about. So I'm thinking, karma, interdependence, these are just topics that we can't avoid. We need to create the karma. We need to have created and be creating the karma to have a school where children can flower in goodness, to use Krishnamurti's phrase. I keep on seeing how when we do put energy in, even the most unremarkable and perhaps disappointing looking scenarios become full of hope, full of energy. I didn't have a very high opinion of some of the teachers that we had, but when they attended a 16 guidelines course in Bodh Gaya not long ago, things came alive for at least 3 or 4 teachers. And now they are, sending photographs and reports, albeit short, of things that they are, working on with the children. And it's very, very encouraging. So one gets this sense that even trapped within a teacher in Bihar, who I can tell you has had an abysmal kind of education at school and university. Maybe they learned some things at home which were very useful, part of Indian wisdom culture, who knows. But a lot of what they are taught, the way they are taught, really puts people to sleep, as probably education does in most parts of the world to some degree. So to see them waking up when they got this 16 guidelines input was incredibly encouraging. And of course, children, you can have children who on the face of it come from poor families. They often aren't very well fed, but somehow you give them a certain input and, something comes alive. There's just that spark they needed. So I'm very, very, I hope in the 8 or 10 years that I've left to be useful, I hope, and to not have to experience onset of any, debilitating mental diseases. one can see that a lot can be done. I would, really want to get things started. And it can happen because the potential is there, and all it needs is the right causes and conditions. We all have, it is said, the Buddha nature. We all have that spark. We have to really understand what tends to put out that spark. And what does tend to put out that spark in India and probably all over the world is the looming threat of examinations. I've seen very clearly how students in class 7 and 8 are doing very well. They have this sparkle in their eyes. And then when they have to start studying for exams, that goes. And because then they become just a kind of competitive machine that has to work hard to get grades. And there's so much pressure from parents and so forth, society at large. So yeah, there is that. How are we doing for time, Matt? And you haven't asked
we're
anything yet. No?
Well, yeah. I mean, we could maybe explore the children a little bit. You said that pressure seems to arise around the time of exams. So how would you would you have a
look, let me
change?
give some background. People send their children to school all over the world, and especially in India, so they can get marks, they can get a job, they can be secure, they can say they have these degrees. So then if it's a male child, they get a more dowry, better marriage and so forth, or at least they get a job, and they can look after their parents when they grow up, because still in India, most old people don't go to, sheltered accommodation or old people's homes. So what does Rinpoche say the first time I have to translate for him in front of all these parents, in Bodh Gaya at the school? He said, the purpose of education of this school is not for students to get a job. I'm translating it, properly, but I mean, there were no rotten tomatoes or eggs from the audience. I mean, I guess, people screen out what they don't want to hear, but there were no adverse reactions at that time. But, for Rinpoche, and I guess for us, we have to think long-term, right? Future lives and et cetera. But parents around the world and in India and Bodh Gaya, they're thinking about who's going to be feeding us in 20 years, because most people don't have pensions, right? Unless it's a good government job, then you have. So everyone wants to get educated to get a government job where you can sit around earning money for doing often not very much, okay? So that's a big challenge. So any kind of schooling we're going to have to give, and this is the thought of the director as well of the Maitreya project, Kushinagar, that there's going to have to be a very strong vocational training component with our education, with our school in Bodh Gaya. Now, Rinpoche wants a Buddhist school in Kushinagar. He made that quite clear. Of course, this is not in any way, this is not to say we can't have both. Yeah, they're not contradictory. I do want to make this sound authentic by quoting Shanti Deva. One of my favorite quotes from Bodhicharyavatara is chapter 5, verse 100, where he says, and this is the Bachelor translation, by the way, there's no such thing as something that is not learned by a bodhisattva. There is no such thing as something that is not learned by a bodhisattva. Thus, if I'm skilled in living in this way, nothing will be non-meritorious. So all these double negatives that we use in English, I don't know if it's there in Sanskrit. But so we have to do whatever's necessary. We have to do all sorts of things, isn't it? I mean, we know that, but it's good that this 8th century Pandit also is encouraging us to do that. So, whether directly or indirectly, he says, the next verse, I shouldn't do anything that is not for the benefit of others. Solely for the sake of sentient beings, I should dedicate everything towards awakening. So we can do whatever it takes, right? Whatever it takes. So long as there's that, bodhicitta motivation, and we dedicate it for something more than just, the happiness of this life, much more than that. So, the field is wide open. So in one sense, of course, it's easy to say that sitting here in actually Venerable Roger's room at Tushita. I'm so fortunate. I was kicked out of a room I was to do retreat in because of a course, and I was put into Roger's room. So I'm very happy in Venerable Roger's room, I can tell you. There's hydrangea outside, reminds me of England. And there was rain, which also reminds me of England. And there was some sunshine, which reminds me of India, which is very nice. Okay, so, what was I saying? I've lost the thread. What was I saying, Matt?
Well, we were talking about the development of teachers. That's where it initially came from.
I like the word we. Yeah, very good. So yes, something like that. So the point is, we have to do whatever's necessary, and there's many things we can do. Yeah, we are living, as we all know, in the most critical, crucial, challenging times, and I think it's very unusual because we have, the power to destroy ourselves in many ways, and there are certain individuals in the world who are being goaded and. Let's hope they don't, like a cat in a corner, do the unthinkable. But at this time, there's also so much potential, so much potential. And I guess people like us who put ourselves in the kind of the goodies category, we have to do as much as we can. We really have to do as much as we can. But what scares me is the kind of what this marvelous author Goodman, have you come across this book? It's really amazing. Buddhist Psychology of Awakening, Stephen Goodman, an in-depth guide to the Abhidhamma. It is so good, bringing the Abhidhamma alive in really intelligent sort of modern language. A great scholar. Anyway, I'm going to read some of this book during my retreats. He speaks about obsessive fixity. And that's what is stopping us, right? Fixity, holding on to the fear, to the clinging to the self and all of that. And I felt that when I went through that experience that I just spoke about at the beginning. Yeah. It's scary. So how do we keep those kind of obsessive fixity, stroke depression, stroke self-loathing, dark clouds, out of our life? And I guess the Dharmic answer, which I'm, putting into effect now, is purification, right? Purification, accumulation of merit, and supplication to the Guru. This is what Manjushri told Tsongkhapa. So I guess if it's good enough for Tsongkhapa, it's good enough for us, right? Especially since we're mainly yellow-hatted people. So yeah.
Would you mind explaining a little bit on what you mean by merit and purification? Because some of the listeners might not be familiar with the terms.
So in the Nalanda tradition, there's the sense that we have a lot of accumulated garbage in our system. Garbage is a word Lama Yeshe would use, which means we have a lot of accumulated unwholesomeness, the imprints of that within our mind stream coming from beginningless past lives. So we have an incredible baggage that we carry with us, So unless we begin to purify that, and unless we create a lot of positive potential in our mind, we're going to be derailed by this heavy, sticky, obsessive, fearful, angry, lustful stuff, which is dragging us down again and again. And we only have to look at what people are doing in the world, what films are about, to see the power of obsession. I promised myself, when I did see some Netflix before I start my retreat tomorrow, the film I saw yesterday on Netflix, brilliantly acted, There Will Be Blood. Yeah, sorry, I don't dislike violent movies, I'm afraid. That is just such a powerful evocation of, what should we say, unwholesomeness ripening, the power of the mind to create hell while still in the human form. Both from so-called spiritual side and the so-called ambitious capitalist side, both of them creating hell. And of course, if things are brilliantly acted and well directed and so forth, then they have more of a meaning, I think, and a message that can come across very strongly. So anyway, the potential, we have to create problems that has to be purified. And of course, Rinpoche says we're crazy, doesn't he? To go, to let a day go by without purifying, without some purification practice. So now the challenge is, how can we also get that started in schools? Because Rinpoche has given in the past his what he wants and why he wants it. So he's very, of course, unapologetic. He said, I want a Buddhist school. I want a Buddhist school because Buddhist psychology is the best way to, train your mind and create the causes for lasting happiness and Buddhahood and so forth. It's so clear for Rinpoche. And I think it's clear for a lot of us. But then how do we put that into effect? And I guess that's what we're trying to do with 16 guidelines. Yeah. But the purification part, how to really get the purification and the 4 opponent powers into the heads of teachers and children, that is something that has to be done skillfully. And I'm sure someone is doing it, and it's just I'm not out, I'm out of touch. And I'm sorry about that. Maybe people can let us know who might be bringing the 4 opponent powers and so forth into schooling. I know we have forgiveness, isn't it, as one of the guidelines. Regret, I'm not sure if regret is there, forgiveness is there. Anyway, that seems to be very important, so important, because otherwise we're just weaving ourselves into hell, actually.
So would you, no, not at all. I mean, yeah, very fascinating. So, so the, purification and accumulation of merit, good things to kind of correct this for the future, if you like. But you spoke about in the moment how it was all overpowering, and you couldn't really control your emotions or your feelings at that time. So would you have any tips on how you did manage it, how you did cope with it, and what can people do if they're feeling like that?
Well, what people can do when they're feeling like that is follow the instructions that their teacher gave them, which I was not doing at that time. I was kind of derailed at that time. And when I got some messages from Roger and from Rinpoche, I think that was also a catalyst to begin self-correcting, because Rinpoche was so kind. He was also kind enough to, send a message to me when he just come out of surgery. So obviously Rinpoche realized. And so then at moments like that, when you remember the kindness of the guru, the kindness of the teacher, then one begins to come out of that darkness. That acts as a kind of a catalyst, I think. And it's also, coincidental with other things that were happening, which were much better. But the thing is, also Rinpoche told me to practice the 5 powers. Yeah. So if one is not doing the practices, then one has, the problems. One has the pain. One has the suffering. If one is doing those practices powerfully, then I think then it doesn't happen. And those imprints are, deactivated, before they can give their effect. So, Lamrim, which I've always been very fond of intellectually, but not integrated, to be honest. Unless that's happening at a deep level, then one's going to continue to have episodes, and be overtaken by the imprints that are just waiting. It's like a gardener who hasn't taken care of their garden. And they have all these seeds there, which they have no idea what's there, and they're not even taking care of the garden. So of course the seeds are going to pop up, the weeds, the poisonous ones, the thorny ones, if one isn't taking good care. So, that is what is, and I'm so happy. And everything has conspired to make this, for me, able to do a 1-month retreat, which is what Rinpoche told me to do, knowing full well I hadn't done a retreat for decades, which is ridiculous. I mean, those who remember Lama's advice to do a retreat every year to recharge the batteries, keep the mind fresh. I always had some excuse or other. So it's just totally my own doing. One undoes oneself, doesn't one? So one has to build oneself up again. So everything came together for this retreat, although I had a very hectic schedule and so forth, but everything has come together so far. And hopefully I'll start tomorrow with your blessings, as we say in India, take everyone's blessing, which is a good thing too, just that God and the Buddha and the Guru can give blessings, everyone can give blessings, isn't it? So hopefully I start tomorrow and there's some good practice, and then that'll create the cause to not have dark episodes, and to be able to benefit beings, because I want to help a whole bunch of children before I, clock off or go
Sounds like
insane.
you're already doing that. It sounds like Kabir. Yeah.
Clocking off.
Um,
Oh dear. Yeah, it does. Oh, that's bad.
and would you so very much your own practice and following the guru's advice for you has been the big savior. But for those of us who who might not be Buddhist, would you have any practical tips on how to deal with these states of mind, and how to...
Oh boy. Well, there's so many WhatsApp messages coming your way every day telling you how to deal with it. But yeah, I think a good practice, this would be good, to sit. If you're in Britain, you sit in a British high street. Of course, it's got to be the sun shining, right? And you have a cup of tea or whatever, and a scone or something like that, something nice like that. You're treating yourself to a cup of tea and a scone. I don't know how the Spanish are going to translate scone. Anyway, this nice little cake, and you have cream on it and jam and all kinds of things which are dreadful for your health, but good for your self-esteem. And you have that, and you just watch the people. Watch people going by. So you have to be in a place where there are other people, right? So you watch all the people and you just look at their faces. And one learns so much looking at people. And look at children, and look at the old people. And relate it to what you know about the Dharma, about Lamrim. And then, think about your own situation. What are the, these, if a person hasn't had teachings on precious human life, doesn't matter. They can think about what's going well for them in their life. The fact that they can sit down, have a cup of tea and watch people, and they're not in some, 19th century workhouse or down a mine, 10 hours a day or whatever, 12 hours a day, coming up at night to fall exhausted into bed, we're not in that situation. They're not in that situation. Plus, I think people have to realize, and this sounds a bit of a cliche, but how at moments when we're not caught up in the past and the future, there is a sense of paying attention in the present moment, slowing down, paying attention. Okay, so here's a modern mantra, which I want to recite, which I got from the introduction to a book of essays by Wendell Berry, the American poet, farmer, and so forth. So there's someone who is introducing his work. So they said it can be summarized thus: slow down, pay attention, do good work, love your neighbor, love your place, stay in your place, settle for less, enjoy it more. Okay, so that's in the introduction to The World-Ending Fire, a bunch of essays, wonderful essays by Wendell Berry, who's someone who gave up the possibility of stardom in New York. He could have been a very famous poet there, but he said, no, I want to go back and restore my land in Kentucky. And he writes exquisitely about what he does, which is to restore the health to his land, his farmland, recognizing that, civilization depends on, talking of interdependence, what do we depend on? We depend on what, 6 inches or less now of topsoil. We're not yet in that phase, are we? Those of us who are fans of Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, we're not yet in the phase where we eat pills to survive. We still survive on veggies and so on and so forth. So we depend on topsoil. Anyway, Wendell Berry, a must read for those who are interested in interdependence and slowing down, paying attention, and the redemptive power of that, and the love that it brings up. You just begin to love and wish yourself and others happy, I think, when we slow down and pay attention. I see too many people, and it's been myself too, running around trying to be very good and spiritual, but we're just tiring ourselves out. We are uptight. We are much too uptight. We have to let go. Sorry, I'm supposed to be giving advice to beginners. Sorry. Say something, Matt. save me from myself.
So yeah, well, it's probably a nice time to look at interdependence, right? So, we've touched on it so far, but maybe you could give a short kind of overview of what we mean by interdependence and why it's considered so important.
Well, everything is connected. If there's an El Nino event in the Pacific Ocean this year, it can affect the monsoon in India. It won't affect me too much because I have the cushioning of being an upper middle class person. And it certainly won't affect me the next month or so, being cushioned in Tushita retreat center. But for poor people, it'll have a hell of a effect. And that will lead to rise of crime. It will lead to rise of authoritarianism, more kind of police rule, more surveillance, all those things that we are not wanting to see. So everything is connected. Weather is connected with economy. Economy is, connected with what we eat, how we relate to one another, and we don't treat economics as Schumacher said we should, as if people mattered. We don't do that. He said that in Small is Beautiful, another book people should read. I think all teachers should be made to read that book, especially his chapter on Buddhist economics. So everything we do, the way I talk to people, the way I don't talk to people, what I'm thinking, it elicits. Just seems to be a rule of the universe. It elicits energy from outside. Again, some people don't like the word energy because I can't think of a better word. Let's remember that for me, people like me, ignoramuses like me, things like WhatsApp are a miracle. All these images are coming through space in a split second. I mean, what is that? I can't understand it. Some of you understand it. Well done. But I don't. So then people say they can't understand how the planets have an effect on us or how we have an effect on each other. It's so obvious that there's a lot going on that we can't see, but we can see the effects of it very quickly. We can see the effects of lack of water on our plants. I get, one of the reasons I don't like leaving Delhi is I don't like leaving the plants, and people forget to water them. It's that basic. Interdependence is basic. It's what one teacher calls basic goodness, actually. The fact that sun rises, it sets, there's light, there's dark. We have this body with all of its organs and so forth. That's a kind of basic goodness. It works. It allows us to live in this world. And one really good exercise, actually, that Valentino Giacomin, who started his Alice project, you may have heard of it. They're kind of rivals, but anyway, one should learn from one's rivals, right? He's in one of his books. Somebody asked the child, where do you end? Where does your body end? And so the child can point to the skin, and they say, "Oh, really? In that case, let's put a plastic bag over you and see, how that is." And of course, one cannot survive in a plastic bag. So then, of course, it goes out until one realizes one depends on the sun. And goodness knows what the sun depends on, of course, apart from the internal elements of the sun. So we're all in one vast web of interrelationships. And, what goes on, and if one's powerful enough, of course, then that can affect millions of people. So what happened 490 days or so ago in Ukraine, or, started to happen then, it's not just due to what's going on in the mind of one powerful person, it's so many, as we know, so many events. If we study history, if we study NATO, if we study Russian history, one can develop a tremendous amount of understanding and sadness, actually, and compassion for countries, for people.
Mm.
Do we know that the Russians lost 26 million people during the Second World War? Soldiers and, civilians combined? Do we know things like that? No, we don't care. That has an effect on people. It has an effect on the people who feel they're in charge. Forget, of course, they're not saints or angels. But, if we don't understand where people are coming from, the interdependence, then how can we love people? How can we forgive them? How can we help them if we just think they're baddies? I have highly intelligent friends in England. They went to Cambridge. They think he is the evil person in the world. It's all the problems right now are due to this one person, Putin. It's ridiculous. And so I spoke to this person's one of their relations. I said, yeah, there's so much hatred in the right-wing press or in certain sections of the press. People just don't think anymore. So we have to see the interdependence of that as well, how much we're affected by language, just language, right? Media. I mean, there's so much has been written on language, right? And the effect it has on how inadequate it is to express ourselves and our feelings, and how much it's open to misunderstanding. Yeah, I mean, the 4 reliances we talk of in Buddhism, don't rely on the words, rely on the meaning. And there you are, and not on the superficial meaning, the deeper meaning. How to do that? Have to generate a wisdom mind, a wisdom consciousness. Almost the Buddha didn't teach because he realized interdependence, and what he had to say was too difficult for most people. They weren't going to understand it. They were too caught up with the 8 worldly dharmas to understand the deeper connections between things, and the life-to-life connections between things.
When you Kabir, when you mention wisdom, what do you mean by wisdom as well?
Wisdom here means an awareness that is not being polluted in the present moment by hope and fear, past or future. It is not governed by anxiety. It is not governed by holding on and feeling one needs to hold on to this thing here, which we call I. So as one person said, when we say I have a problem, I is the problem. We don't have problems. I is the problem in the beginning. To have that sense of an I is already a problem for most of us, because we're clinging onto it in the wrong way, right? As independently existing, something has to be protected, has to be fed, emotionally fed all the time, and so on and so forth. So wisdom is something that is more spacious. Yeah, when you look at some of the simple definitions of Buddha nature, without going into Uttara Tantra and huge tomes, there's a sense of intelligence, basic intelligence, openness, warmth. There's a sense of friendliness, a sense of openness. There's a sense of spaciousness. Space is a word that comes up a lot. Not spoken a lot about in the Gelugpa, I think. Nyingma and others speak much more about space. Shanti Deva, bless his cotton socks, he speaks about space, doesn't he, so beautifully in the last few verses of the wisdom chapter, most of which, of course, is quite difficult. He says, apart from those sentences, which are very moving, where he says, who is there to suffer, and this and that. Oh, this is verse 154, chapter 9 of the guide. Oh, you who are investigating reality, please recognize, as I have done, that all is just like space. And those who wish to be happy are greatly disturbed by causes for conflict and overjoyed by the causes for pleasure. So, a wisdom consciousness has spaciousness. Lama was often talking about this. He said, I'm going to debate with these geshes, he would say. Spaciousness is very important. In that sense, he was a kind of a trailblazer, wasn't he, within Gelugpa? Thank goodness for Lama there. Yeah.
We've not at all. We've probably got one.
Did that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, certainly did. That does help a lot. So we've probably got time for one more question. So before we move into the practice session. So it might be nice to quickly look at, you touched on WhatsApp earlier. I mean, and children and social media. I mean, does social media drive unhealthy perceptions about ourselves and about who we should be? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
I think there's not much to say, is there? We all know what's being said, and I think a lot of it's true. I mean, I grew up, I'm so glad, sometimes I'm unhappy, but I'm so glad mainly that I was born in the middle of the 20th century. I wasn't brought up with, Kellogg's cornflakes and iPads. I was brought up with Kellogg's cornflakes and porridge and going out and playing, outside. I didn't have all these instruments that were, distracting me. The first time I really watched television, it was wonderful because, England beat Germany 4-2 in the World Cup. Sorry, Germany, 1966, sorry, German folks. Black and white telly at that. And they were, landing on the moon, 1960. Oh, big event, huge. We are fascinated by simple things. Well, landing on the moon isn't that simple, I guess. But you know what I mean? It's like now, and I used to write letters. I don't know how many people on the screen now have written hundreds of letters like me, and then you get a reply in 8 days, 10 days, and you're happy. And now, what is it, 10 seconds? You don't get a reply on WhatsApp, then you wonder, what is the other person doing? Why aren't they replying to my message? So it's okay for us, we're all kind of mature people here, but for children, it must be devastating. And Instagram and TikTok and all the garbage there, oh man, it's dreadful. It makes
and it's a problem.
Want the internet to collapse. So then we really are, then it's going to be interesting, isn't it? If internet collapses, how many people will have heart attacks on the same day, same second, like Brazilians have heart attacks when their team loses, it's going to be, but for us who were born in the middle of the 20th century, we'll adjust much easier than people who are brought up. So I think it's incredibly dangerous. People can't relate to each other with maitri, with loving kindness, with friendliness. There's always some kind of judging and comparing, and very tough, it seems, for adolescent women especially. Maybe men, I don't know, probably men too, but it seems like the women get the worst of it. Feeling they have to look this way, act that way, or whatever. That's devastating. I think it's just devastating. But of course, I check Google regularly, definitely, especially, words. And if I was watching the movie yesterday, I wanted to know more about the lead actor and the actress and this and that. But then it's information, it's knowledge. Where's the deep meaning to that? How does it help me realize emptiness or generate bodhicitta? Is it interfering with the 5 powers or not? Yes, it is. Unless one is incredibly skillful, you can't use the 5 powers all the time that you're, distracted with WhatsApp. At least I can't.
So have you seen any nice ideas with, with the teachers or in the schools that you're involved with, on how they might address this kind of issue in children, how they might, limiting social media, or, have you found any particularly effective methods for helping children cope with that?
Well, the reason I said that I don't know why I'm here in front of all of you, is that I've had precious little time at these schools because I've been so busy with administrative work and our Delhi center. And our Delhi center doesn't have a school. So on my very short trips to Bodh Gaya and even shorter trips to Kushinagar, I haven't yet had time to really work at something in depth with the teachers. But this, I'm glad you brought it up, because this is an essential factor. Even the Rishi Valley School, Krishnamurti's prime school in South India, the people there, the teachers there, are very worried of the effect that media is having on the kids, obviously, Krishnamurti is not there anymore to inspire people and, really goad them into action, because he would openly say to the kids, what are you going to do now? You're going to go out into a rotten society. He would use that language. What are you going to do? How are you going to survive in a rotten society? And actually, a lot of those children apparently don't do so well. They do find it hard to adjust in the big bad world out there, So, yeah, we have to be incredibly skillful somehow to... it needs a lot of people putting energy full time. That's what we need. We need a lot of younger people. And I'm glad most of the people in front of me here, a lot of them are young people. We need younger people and not senior citizens like me, really doing this. And I'm sure it's happening. I'm sure it's happening. And I'm sure Alison and Wendy and Victoria, who are here, they are doing their utmost to inspire and, bring a lot of younger people into the field, because that has to happen. That really has to happen. Because there's so much to be done. There's so much to be done. and the forces, and when you go out and in the metro in Delhi, the underground system in Delhi, you just see people just looking at their mobile phones. No one is reading a book. No one is reading a book. Of course, I'm attached to old-fashioned books, yeah. No one seems to be reading good literature, but there are still some. It's not totally lost. It's not yet Fahrenheit, what is it, 451. They're not burning books yet, at least in India, or at least very few books. They are burning some, but not Buddhist books yet, thank goodness. I don't think they'll burn the 16 guideline books in a hurry. So I think there's still a lot of hope, but we need to really, I would like to know how many young people, by young, under 40, 45, let's say, really young, who are involved with FDCW. Anyone there to give an answer?
I'll have to have a look at this.
Teachers.
Yeah, it's a big number, right? We tried to look last year. We calculated the audience. I think we've reached over 50,000 people. But how many of those are young? Yeah, it's
but
hard to say without investigating.
How many teachers and trainers involved who are young? Teachers and trainers. That's the question.
Yeah, I'd have to have a look on our facilitator network. Yeah, but that's a good question.
We need so many, because the forces of that are putting us to sleep, anesthetizing us, are so strong. So we need a really powerful counterforce, and people taking to heart Shanti Deva's advice. There's no such thing as something that isn't learned by Bodhisattva. So we are aspiring, of course, but there's so much we have to do, don't we? And all of you are doing wonderful work. I feel we're not doing that much in India yet, but hopefully the Kushinagar project, which Rinpoche so much wanted, there to be a good school there. He was so pushing us, Buddhist school, and so forth. But I think we need young people, and of course, young Indian people have to come forward to help us with that. There are some already who seem interested, but we need more people. And we see how dependent we are on the younger generation, and we have to take care of them, right? Quite apart from feeling tremendous gratitude when I'm in places like this for everybody, especially my parents, bringing me into this world so I can, experience this. It's extraordinary, amazing kindness. And especially also saddening, because one realizes they didn't have that opportunity. They didn't create the cause to have great teachers like Lama and Rinpoche and so forth, and enjoy places like this. So one is doubly sort of thankful to the elder generation, the grandparents.
Yeah. Thank you, Kabir. That's really insightful discussion. We're nearing the end now. It would be nice to lead a practice, if that's okay. So
how long do I have?
Well, we went a little bit over, but I think because you were down, if you were down, do I think 10-minute practice is fine. If anyone needs to leave, of course they can cut.
So
if that's okay with you,
always happy. It'll get me into the meditative mood, since I'm supposed to be doing a retreat from tomorrow. So better get used to meditating. So thank you, everyone. You can keep your eyes open, or you can have them closed or slightly open. But as long as you're not looking at people on the screen too much, that would be a bit distracting, especially if your friends are there or your enemies. So please. So let's remember to slow down and pay attention to this so-called person, combination of body, mind, almost like seems miraculously brought into the world through the uniting of a sperm and an egg in the mother's womb, or a person's womb. And here we are, collective. We've created a collective karma to be here, to be students of 16 guidelines, FDCW, the lamas. And to be here at this juncture of world history with extraordinary challenges and extraordinary potentials. So what are we going to do about it? So take a few deep breaths and just see if you can relax with the out breath. Just let go with the out breath. Just let go. Allow yourself to be relaxed. Sense of stillness, sense of relaxation. A sense of being very awake, very aware. And if there's a sense of being stressed or uptight or tense somewhere, that's okay. Just feel that you're making friends with that, and that there's room for everything. There's room in the mind for everything. It's like space. It's vast, like space. So in this short time we have, let's remember a couple of things. The kindness of others, and how everything is just a little bit like a dream, isn't it? So remember the kindness, starting with wherever you want. You may have researched your grandparents, your great-grandparents. Start where you want. We all have, a lot of us have genes from Genghis Khan. You want to thank him, maybe. Anyway, maybe parents. That's more down to earth. Wow, they did so much. Most parents did so much. Even if they abandoned us when we were born, just think how much, at least the mother had to go through it. So whether they were happy or sad, or whether we had a so-called happy or so-called sad upbringing or whatever, how kind they were. Really, how kind they were. Because we have this body. We can see and hear and taste and touch and smell those delicious smells coming out of the shop selling coffee. And we have this extraordinary mind, with its ability to be gentle and courageous, loving. And yet it's all a bit dreamlike, isn't it? Yesterday, your childhood, your parents. Where are they? Who are they? Who are we? The kindness is connected to the interconnectedness. At least whatever we know, whether we know about emptiness or not, we know we are connected. We know we depend on other people, on animals, on the soil, on vegetation. on the earthworms, the bees. So many dependent relationships, interdependent relationships. It's extraordinary. The kindness of others is extraordinary. It's it's just extending infinitely, it seems. And they all want to be happy, like you and me, and they make such a mess of things, don't they? Don't we? So how wonderful it would be if we could help beings create happiness and its causes through wisdom, through compassion, through understanding. That used to be a slogan, I think, for the previous avatar of FDCW. Freedom through understanding, wisdom, compassion through understanding. That the compassion comes when we understand the connectedness. And the more we understand the connectedness, the more the compassion comes, and vice versa. The more compassion, the more we realize how we are interrelated. There's no obsessively fixed central headquarters running the show. Let's dedicate for the welfare of all of FDCW's projects, for there to be vast numbers of very wise and kind, intelligent young teachers and trainers helping multitudes of young people to develop their potential, for them to flower in goodness. For the sake of this planet, for the sake of this world and all the beings. And of course, we must dedicate for all of our teachers to have long and healthy lives, and for Lama Zopa Rinpoche to quickly return to us in whatever form is most beneficial for us in the period ahead. And as Rinpoche would always say, may there always be harmony, well-being amongst all the members, all the practitioners, everyone connected with FDCW. May we realize the great responsibility we have, not just because some of us may have taken certain vows, but just because as human beings, don't we need to help each other right now? You know? So may that happen. So thank you for your patience.